If there's one thing we love, it's fairness. We love when things are fair. We hate it when things are unfair. And so we see it at home where, if one kid gets slightly more screen time than the others, all hell breaks loose. Or with all the COVID restrictions, things are not equal or even between all the local government areas at the moment. There's unfairness. Or we think that someone deserves reward according to what they have done. Or, the more someone works, the richer they should get, you think would be fair. We love when there's fairness. We love it when reward is given to those who have earned it. And so we see something very different when Jesus describes the kingdom of heaven. And we've seen this all through our parable so far. The kingdom of heaven is not as we expect it to be. Let's see what the kingdom of heaven is like as we hear from God today. Grab your Bible, turn to Matthew chapter 20. We're going to hear a parable which I really love. I don't know why, I love this parable. Let's see what God has to say from the parable of the workers in Matthew 20. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire workers for his vineyard. He agreed to pay them a denarius for the day and sent them into his vineyard. About 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. He told them, "You also go and work in my vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right." So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 in the afternoon and did the same thing. About 5 in the afternoon, he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because no one has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the others and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more. But each one of them also received a denarius. When they received it, they began to grumble against the landowner. "Those who were hired last worked only 1 hour," they said, "and you have made them equal to us who have borne the burden of the work and the heat of the day." But he answered one of them, "I am not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius? Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or are you envious because I am generous?" So the last will be first, and the first will be last. Well, don't you feel the aggrievement of those hired first in the day? The ones who were hired just an hour before the knockoff bell, they got the same wage as those who were hired at the very start of the day and had to work all day out in the hot sun, but they both get the same wage. We feel, hang on, that's not right, that's not fair. How could the landowner do this? Well, this is what the kingdom of heaven is like. God is like that landowner. He's got the ability to do whatever he wants with his money. Now, we saw it towards the end of our passage, down in verse 13. He answered one of them, "I'm not being unfair to you, friend. Didn't you agree to work for a denarius?" So it's totally fair. He paid them what they agreed. "Take your pay and go. I want to give the one who was hired last the same as I gave you. Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money?" Well, I guess that's a fair point. He's a landowner. He can pay people however he wants. And he wants to give the same to those who are hired last, to those who are hired first. But then he says, "Or are you envious because I am generous?" We'll come back to that in a minute. Let's go back to the start of the parable, pick out a few things. Firstly, let's think about the state of these workers. So we start, the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner, and he's got a vineyard. It must be harvest time, lots of work to be done. And so he goes out and hires his workforce. So back in the day, you might have had your own household slaves and workers who worked with you. But then, particularly when extra work was needed, you'd go out into the marketplace or go out into the town, and there'll be people, just standing around looking for work. Because these day labourers, they weren't part of a company, they weren't part of a union. All they had to live on was if someone hired them for work for the day. And so the landowner goes out, hires some men early in the morning. But then he goes out again. Verse 3, about 9 in the morning, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace doing nothing. And he hires them as well. So what we have here is, he's not hiring them because there's more work to be done necessarily, but he's hiring because they've got no work to do. The workers don't have any work. And so they're going to go home possibly without means to provide for their families because they haven't been able to find work. And the landowner does this multiple times through the day, even at 5 o'clock, with only 1 hour of the workday to go. He sees these people doing nothing. They've been unable to find work. And so he hires them. There can't be that much more work to be done. But he hires them because he wants to pay them. He wants to reward them. So here's what it's like with the kingdom of heaven. It's not about getting what we deserve because of our effort. The reward of God, salvation in Jesus, is not determined in accordance with what we have done, what we might have earned. It's all determined on the generosity of the landowner, the generosity of God, which is a wonderful truth, which means that no matter what you've done in the past, whether it's masses of sinful things in your history, God will still reward you the same with salvation. If you have grew up with a Christian family and have been living faithfully with God all your life, then God will give you the reward of salvation. If your trust is in Jesus. If you turn to God on your deathbed and you put your trust in Jesus, then God will reward you with salvation. What amazing generosity from God. But many of us will be like those hired first and getting a little bit envious. Because if we think that rewards should match the effort that we put in, then we might think, I've been living a godly life all my life. I've abstained from sinful things. I've given up lots for the gospel. Shouldn't I get rewarded more? Shouldn't I have shouldn't I get more of salvation than others? Or we can get envious of others who may turn right at the end, or may have lived a really sinful life, and then suddenly turn. And you've missed out on all that, pleasure seeking or whatever, because you've been faithful to Jesus. Shouldn't they get less than you? Yeah, we can get envious like that. Or maybe we can think, I know my history. I haven't earned anything from God. I don't deserve it. And so maybe you think that you or someone like you is beyond reward. Or maybe if you think that reward should match what's earned, you might think that God's not very generous. If you think like that, you think that God only gives you what you deserve. But this parable says God is super generous. Just like us who are in the town square needing work to survive, God provides us with work and reward. God provides for us in our need. And whether we receive that reward when we, early in our life or later in life, or before we've sinned a lot or after we've sinned a lot, God is generous in giving us salvation, no matter what we have done. So that's a wonderful truth to go, okay, I am saved, not because of what I've done, but because of the generosity of the landowner. And my friends are not beyond salvation. Even if they don't deserve it, God is a generous God, and he's willing to bring salvation to them if they turn to Jesus. There's a lot more in that parable, and think through what is your response when you think about God giving out salvation evenly, despite how people have lived their lives up until they accept Jesus. That might be a good thing to think through. Read the Bible again, spend some time praying, maybe thanking God for the generosity he's given us in Jesus.